All right. The next method of facilitating the budget process is exercising oversight over capital budgeting and expenditures to ensure that ownership's funds are expended judiciously. The asset manager is partially tasked with ensuring that the money allocated for CapEx is spent as intended and when it's intended. They pore over the financial statements constantly, in great detail. Asset managers, that's their main job, is going over these financial statements and to see where and how the expenditures are being made and that allocated funds are spent in a timely manner. Say if the facility manager has $100,000 allocated for the fiscal year for heat pump replacements, they can't wait until the fourth quarter of the year and say, oh yeah, I forgot I had that money for heat pump replacement. I should spend it right now. Well, I better get the bids together and in place and get things going here. No, I'm sorry. You start the process at the beginning of the fiscal year, so at the time the funds are allocated for distribution, they're made available to you, you're ready for it. The chief engineer, director of engineering, or facility manager, they're ready for it. And the asset manager must follow up to ensure these actions are being taken. Best practice is to start the bidding process for capital projects during the budget process, or at the beginning of the budgeting process. Even if it means the work's not going to be accomplished for another year, get the bidding going. Be proactive. The maintenance manager, the property operator, and the asset manager both need to be proactive in this. This process does not happen overnight, so both must be proactive in making this happen. Okay, the next asset manager role is creating an effective system for monitoring and anticipating capital expenditures. Now that goes back to what I previously said about the heat pumps. You have a 20-year life expectancy on these heat pumps, on these units. Now these particular heat pumps we're talking about were installed in 1995. Now the year's 2010, 15 years in the future, 15 years later. And now I see, lifespan is 20 years or 15 years old, ding, light goes off. I need to get these on the 5-year capital plan. In fact, 5 years ago, you should have already been planning on this, putting them on the 10-year plan. Tentatively planning for early replacement, because generally speaking, they don't all quite make it through the 20 years, no matter how good you might be at the preventative maintenance. Now, the asset manager must have all documentation tracking the age of the facility equipment. They need the documentation for the PM processes, the condition reports, the life expectancy of the equipment. This documentation is vitally important because you, the asset manager, need to put the heat pump replacement on the capital plan, on the 5 and the 10-year capital plan. And if you're replacing 300 heat pumps at $1,500 a pop, 300 heat pumps at $1,500 a pop, that's a lot of money to allocate. That's nearly $500,000. You can't wake up in the morning and say, oh, my heat pumps are 18 years old. I got to start replacing them. Yeah, the owner's going to look at you and go, huh? Next thing you know, you're unemployed. No, it's a lot of money that when you're talking expenses like that, capital expenses, you must be planning forward. You must be tracking these things. You must have the documentation that assists you with that planning. Now, the fourth asset manager role that we have here, and the final role, is to assist the strategic decision making. Assist strategic decision making that when the ownership faces upcoming capital expenditures. What do I mean by that? The owner knows they're facing capital expenditures. They're going to rely on the knowledge of the asset manager. And again, they have the asset manager is going to be the go-to person, communicating the necessary equipment condition information to the ownership And when large expenses, and also when large expenses are planned, the asset manager needs to communicate to the ownership when large asset purchases, large expenses are planned or to be made. All right. And again, making sure the 5 and 10-year plans are accurate. This is their money. This is the money of the ownership that's being used. They would certainly like to know what is happening with it, where it's being dispersed, what it's being used for. Now, there's one more role, final thing that wraps it all together. This is my role. Know your building. Know it, inside and out. You must know your buildings, your facilities. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be an architect. You don't have to have had a job in the service industry in maintenance capacity, serving in a maintenance capacity at any time. You don't need to be an HVAC technician. But you do need to know what the building is about. You know what your building is about. You're an asset manager. You may have an MBA or another master's degree, a business degree. You all have college degrees. You're intelligent, thoughtful. You know how to think and learn. You don't have to be an engineer, but you do need to know your building. Don't leave it to chance. All right. Moving right along, the next little part of this we're going to talk about is property maintenance. The asset manager needs to have a knowledge of property maintenance and also what the asset manager's role in property maintenance is. The asset manager needs to understand and facilitate the property's day-to-day maintenance programs. And again, I'm not saying micromanaging. No standing over someone's shoulder. We don't have any time for that. None of us, no asset manager does, and it's irresponsible to do that. Completely irresponsible. But understanding and facilitating means you know that there is a PM process in place, and when you visit the property, whether monthly or quarterly, you inspect the PM records. I want to see your PM log. I want to see your equipment checklist. I want to see your morning checklist. Review these things and make sure that they are actually done. All right, next, as the asset manager, create or assist the property manager or engineer in creating the PM program. Now, the chief engineer or maintenance engineer, facility manager, whoever it may be, they are the professionals. They're the professionals who know how to create a PM program. The asset manager needs to assist the PM programs, needs to understand the PM programs, needs to know what it is, what it's about, needs to be able to provide positive input into the process, needs to be able to ask the right questions. If you don't know what a PM process is, how are you going to ask the right questions so that you can make the best decisions? The asset manager needs to be actively involved in the PM program, not the one in charge of it, not the one in charge of the entire process, but involved in it. And again, not micromanaging. I can't stress that enough. It's not because it'll drive people crazy, because you don't have the time for that. You need to delegate. Key there, delegating, making sure other people are doing their jobs.